you've been here before, you know that the series is designed to bring together Arizona growers, food system partners, and organizations to share knowledge, tools, and stories that strengthen our local food systems. So, to that end, we have joining us today Michael Pierce. As I said, he will be our speaker, and he brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to this presentation. He has worked in vineyards in New Zealand, Australia, and Oregon. He spent 15 years working in the Arizona wine industry as a winemaker, vineyard manager, and educator. He has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree in agricultural leadership, communication, education, and he supports small acreage agricultural producers in Yavapai County through technical assistance and educational programs with the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. So, by way of an introduction, I hope that sparks your interest. But if not, certainly what's about to happen will. I'm going to pass this over to Michael so that he can engage with the meat and potatoes of the day. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Braden and Erica. I appreciate it. It's good to see some names in the chat that I recognize. There's quite a few local people here in Yavapai County where I'm at. So thank you for joining. What I put together was broad, and I would say definitely focus on Arizona. I didn't want to forget which state we were in. But I knew there was going to be people from all over the place. My role, I support commercial horticulture, so food producers in Yavapai County. If you're not familiar with Cooperative Extension, we've got offices there might not be an office in all county, but there's a presence in all county. Ag and Natural Resources, which is what I do. There's also FCHS, which is Family Consumer Health Science. And that is actually has some overlay with what we do as farmers when you start to have value-added crops, which we're going to talk about, where you actually produce stuff, and we've got food safety involved. And then there's also 4-H. Some of you guys maybe grew up doing 4-H. All of that is under the umbrella of Cooperative Extension, but I do specifically commercial horticulture. I've been growing wine grapes with my family. We're going into our 16th season. So that's where my specialty is a perennial crop. We have about 32 acres, so it's a decent size. It is a value-added crop, which we'll talk about the definition of. And we've kind of gone through all of these iterations that we'll cover in this presentation of needing to scale up and what that looks like. I will say it's hard to be really prescriptive in a presentation like this because I imagine each of your farms are unique. I guarantee you they're all unique in your size, in what you grow, your outlets to markets, what you have established now. So what I'm hoping to do in this conversation is to not tell you some pathway of which way you should go, but help you understand how you should think about developing the pathway that makes most sense for you. I also think the more we can turn this into a conversation, there's not a million people on this Zoom. There's few enough that at any point you just want to unmute and ask questions and engage. Please do. I think questions help me. Even if you want to push back a little bit, I think that friction is where things get done and people start to learn more. So, yeah, consider it's open forum here. When we're talking about scaling up, again, my focus is on commercial farms, so it's not necessarily the backyard gardeners. I imagine you, like me, we started loving growing at some point in our life. So we probably started as a backyard gardener, but now we are a business operation and we need to be commercially viable. People think farms that aren't into it, it's probably a really, I guess sexy is the best way to look at it. People think, oh man, I'd love to have a farm and grow some vegetables and have all these fresh vegetables around. But what they don't understand is that there's some regulation there. We have to be careful of what we're doing where. We also have to sell. So not only do you have to understand how to grow, you have to understand how to sell. And then there's really low margins. So those three things make it a tough business. When we're talking about commercial viability, I came up with this idea of three different legs of the stool. And this presentation is going to go through each of them and how we can utilize them all to get to commercial viability. When you reflect on where you're at with your own operation, you might need to just use one of these legs of the stool, really focus on building infrastructure or really focus on your crop succession planning. Or maybe you don't feel you're getting enough margin back, so you need to change what you're planting so you can get higher value. Perhaps it's all three. Um, you'll have to make that decision for yourself. In Arizona, and it seems like everybody who filled out the chat there is kind of on the smaller side. I don't know if anybody's large. Maybe somebody said they were a pivot farmer, so they might be the exception. Um, Arizona does have big agriculture, but we have, especially in Yavapai County, we have small specialty crop agriculture. So that's small acreage, high density, and hopefully high economic return per the acreage. Land's very expensive. So I think the future of Arizona agriculture is going to be that small 5 acres or less. I just don't see that changing. So what we need is the maximum amount of efficiency. I want you to think for a second what some of your constraints might be. Looking at that constraint triangle, do you not have enough land? Some of you have plenty of land, some of you don't. What's your water source like? If you're in a municipal place, you might be paying a high price for water. Um, the last vineyard I was at, we were actually growing using reclaimed water, which allowed us to have plenty of water, but we had a water quality issue where there was high salt. So that was a constraint for us. And then I don't know of anybody who doesn't have some amount of labor constraint. Add into that labor category time. So if you're an owner operator, you probably have a limited amount of time. And what we need to do is think of which of those three constraints are kind of our biggest impediment to finding efficiency, and we'll focus on those. Um, I figure if you were on this Scaling Smart presentation, you're looking to go from some sort of a subsistence, maybe you're still up and going, you've got to personally put in some money and you want to get to commercial viability where it's making money and actually returning. We do have very thin margins in farming, so we're going to make the most of all of our water, land, and time and money. So how many of you, I'm going to try and get somebody to unmute and add their thoughts over here. How many of you are actually planning on scaling up in terms of acreage? Do any of you just simply want to plant more cropland? Or are you really looking to scale up your business?
I'll unmute. This is Jill Thompson. I put in the chat that we're on a 12-acre nonprofit farm, but a good section, and Michael, you've been here and toured the farm. A good section of that acreage is in flood zone. So we are thinking about, crops, things that will make sense so that we can utilize that land because currently it is not being utilized, to the extent that it could be. So that's one of our challenges and focus areas is to think about how we might be able to do that.
Yeah, nice, Joe. Yeah, that's a perfect constraint. You've got land there, but you've got some limitations on how you can use it. So now we need to think
Exactly.
about the best way to do it. Um, Ultimately, with how the price of land is high, even if you've got land, maybe you're limited. We're talking about more profit. So the space that you do have, how can we get more out of it? Perhaps that's irrigation efficiency. Perhaps that's planting at the right time. Hopefully, we're taking notes and learning. One of the things I always hate to do is when I make the same mistake again, and it's like, I know that. I remember seeing that in, 2018, but maybe I needed a reminder. So the best we can write things down, the better we're going to be. Extending the season. Arizona's got agriculture. So we got this great sunshine. We've got really good photosynthesis. People wonder why we have things like alfalfa and cotton in Arizona. It's because we grow great cotton and we grow great alfalfa because we got sunshine. Yes, they're water intensive and we need to address that concern, but we can also grow excellent vegetables because we got sunshine. Our challenge is, depending on where you're at, hot of summer, cold of winter. So how do we extend our times so we've got a consistent crop all the way around? That's going to be one of the things we can look at in that second leg of the stool. And then aligning our infrastructure with our market demand. I'm going to say multiple times, we need to think of the market as our guiding point. And this is the way I look at it for our wine production for our family brand. We don't just start in the vineyard and grow whatever grapes we want and make whatever wine we want and hope the market is going to, bear it and we're going to have an outlet. We need to look at the market, and then everything on the way back, the decisions are made. In the cellar, I will make what wine I need for the market. I will then communicate back to the vineyard, who my dad grows all the grapes for us down in Wilcox. Here's what we need. Here's the tonnage we need. Here's the varieties we need. Here's the bricks level we need. So it's very much, think of the market as the front lines of your business, and decision making happens going backwards. So what do we need to spend our money on? We all want more. Everybody's got a needless want list. Here's one way to just think about it. We've got those constraints, right? We've brainstormed what our constraints might be. Maybe it's time or labor. Let that be your filter. So as you write down the things you want, you want a tractor. Maybe that's the best option or not. I don't know. Does that new infrastructure expenditure relieve your stress on that constraint? Does it help you get to that efficiency? If the answer is yes, well, then you can probably move it forward in your decision making on that might be a good option. I will say where you should invest, water reliability, we're in Arizona, so we want to be efficient. Post-harvest cooling, I'm kind of assuming you guys are, well, it doesn't have to be a food crop. It could also be cut flowers, which is a really good business proposition. You don't want to have loss, and you want to have a good way, once you grow this nice, beautiful fruit, to keep it in good, beautiful shape before you get it into the consumer's hands. I will say basic tools that work, don't be short of that. Don't save $5 on a shovel because you want a tractor. Buy the nice shovel, that sort of thing. So that's my comment there on infrastructure. Consider what constraint it might or might not be helping you with. Water. Oh man, we are getting better with water. I tell you, agriculture is in the conversation with water all the time because we use a large percentage of it across the board. Part of my job is, since cooperative extension, we're in the middle there. We're not necessarily producers. We're certainly not regulators, but what we can do is we can communicate, here's what the farmers are doing to people who govern water policy. And I do not know of a single farmer who is, just wasteful, who's just doesn't care about water. They are more mindful about water than most people. I think we still have room for improvement. I would consider putting in a fertigation system. These dosatron units are pretty nice. They are pretty pricey depending on your size. There's different types of these units. Dosatron's as a brand. We've got something different in our vineyard. It does save labor. Consider starting some sensor monitoring in your farm. Soil monitors are great. There's a couple different projects right now. The Verde NRC has some soil moisture monitoring projects where they can get some free soil moisturing monitors into farms. That can really look at your efficiency, and maybe you're not watering enough, maybe you're watering too much. Ultimately, we want to stop guessing and start measuring. If you're not familiar with the concept of ET, evapotranspiration, send me an email and we can have a conversation, start looking it up. Become familiar with this. It's a matter of temperature, humidity, also solar radiation, how much our plants are actually transpiring and having water leave. We need to irrigate to make sure we don't have a deficiency in our ET. So that ET value can actually tell us exactly how much we need to water. And maybe we're out watering too much. Climate strategy. How many of you want to add some sort of a growing structure? Do you guys have what you need? Joe and Marcus, you guys have some structure. You guys got a lot of structures.
Right. We have a 4,500 square foot greenhouse, and we would love to be able to grow year round, but it's the ground in the greenhouse is just too cold. We'd certainly like to be able to offer more vegetables uh, to the food banks year round, but at this point, it limited to what we can grow in there.
Mhm. Uh, so possibly some raised beds or something to offset that really cold soil.
Yeah,
You've
well, the other
identified the
problem that we have
challenge.
is we replace the cover and it's a 90% shade cover. So things that need more sunlight don't do well in there.
Sounds like you've optimized for summer growing and not winter growing with your shade cover.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the cover was bought before we got here, so we kind of have to live with it.
yeah, yeah. Good example. So if we're looking for some low cost extension, um, row covers are great. What I'm finding the more I'm getting into the vegetable world is even though in winter we do get cold, we have such great sunshine in Arizona that it can actually be too intense even in the winter time. And we might need just a little bit of shading depending on your site. Also depends on what you're growing. But row covers are great. Keeps the bugs out, keeps a little bit of the humidity in. And if you do them like these low tunnels here, they're relatively inexpensive and they're multi-purpose. But you can get several weeks extension on both sides by some relatively inexpensive row covers. Uh, Shade structures are pretty valuable. Once we start getting into this $10 to $15 per linear foot, you really have to get some compact growing in there. You need to be very efficient, use every last linear foot you have, and also consider possibly growing something that is slightly more higher return to offset your costs. So it just depends on what you're growing. Um, One more thing to think about, do a dual use strategy. And it sounds like, Marcus, what you described, you kind of have one or the other here. You know, you could have a high tunnel that you just have a frost cloth on that keeps things cold, keeps the solar radiation coming through, good light coming through, keeping the heat in the winter. And then in the summer, if you could change it to a shade cloth, get good airflow. Um, Most of these high tunnels that I see in Yavapai County, almost all of them have the roll up sides because it gets so warm in the summer that it actually gets prohibitive to grow in there. So you need good airflow and you need good shade. So as you're contemplating, this is going back to our thought process of infrastructure, trying to alleviate what our constraint is. Only pay for that if it's going to alleviate whatever your constraint is. Um, yeah. Now, once we process our grapes, maybe we need to keep it in good grapes. Once we process whatever our produce is, you see where my mind goes. The crop isn't sold until it's eaten. If you are a direct-to-consumer producer, you know how beautiful it needs to be. You know, aesthetics are very important as you're standing there at the farmer's market. So we want to keep it as in good of shape as possible. We also have some requirements. The FSMA produce safety rule requires that once you get above a certain amount of annual sales, you need to be able to clean to a certain level, and you need to make sure that your wash water and your wash arrangement is of what their standards are. So at some point, you're going to want to upgrade to having an actual wash station with the right amount of sinks. The U of A does have on our extension website, which I'll share with you here at the end, there is a guideline for how to set up a wash and pack and actually a what do you call it? Kind of a plan for how to build it yourself and what implements you need to make it as kind of cost effective as possible. If you're doing a high volume, you might want to invest in some sort of a cooling system. So as you harvest, you can get the heat off right away. You see this CoolBot. This is not, it's actually a CoolBot with an AC unit. The CoolBot is the thermostat, and that does not cost you $1,500. That'll be, $300-400 or so. What that thermostat runs is basically an AC unit. So if you can get a well insulated storage unit, you can turn that into kind of a makeshift walk-in cooler. Eventually, you would then maybe upgrade into a walk-in cooler. However, this is a much more significant investment, and now we need to kind of pencil whether or not the savings is offset by loss. To reiterate what I had mentioned before about thinking from the market backwards, we don't want to just plant and then find a market. We find a market and then plant. How many of you go to farmers markets? Most of you? Yeah, I see some hand. Yeah. Okay. Seems like everybody goes to farmers markets. That's great. It's usually where we start. Highest return. You're talking right to your customers. Nobody can sell your product better than you can. That's the best way to have it, is have your customer right in front of you and your product right there. And you can tell them all about your story, and that's what they're going to want to buy. If you want to scale up, you're going to want to take that opportunity to learn who that customer is and maybe start thinking about doing something like a CSA share where you get them on a subscription basis and you can sell them weekly. That's great, right? We already have this customer. Let's scale up here and add this other component to our business, which is fine. But now that scaling up changes what we need to plant because we've changed our market. Even though it's the same customer, now we need some variety each week. They might have bought lettuce from you at the farmer's market. Next week, they're going to want some cool colored carrots or something. They're going to want something. Consistency and weekly volumes required. Here's where you might want to start partnering with maybe another local farm to make sure that you can have that consistent flow. But we can go from, farmer's market one-time sale to continued sale. The next step up would be wholesale. Do any of you guys do wholesale to restaurants? I don't see all of you there. So, and if you do, what do you sell to them? Hearing none, hearing none. Nobody. Do you guys want to sell to restaurants?
I'll jump in. We were initially trying to start that process here at Eco Farm with our microgreens because we have a pretty robust microgreen production. But what we were running into is that our cost, our pricing was higher than some of the, Marcus, what was the name of that? Cisco and some of the other wholesalers that, were selling. They said our quality was great and higher in some cases, but the pricing, where we had to price it was, a challenge for us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good piece of information. Yeah. I bet your quality and your story is far superior to what Cisco could ever be able to offer to them. So now it's a matter of, creating a unique product they don't, or doing something to where that story really creates the value that they will pay the premium. And I think the right restaurant will do that. Thank you for sharing that. That's a good example. So on that note, the market ladder. So seems like just about everybody's starting in that direct to consumer frame where it's high margin. You get all the money. All that dollar goes right back to you. However, it's also high time. You've got to be there at the setting up the booth, maybe every Saturday. There's a lot of great farmers markets, thankfully, here in Yavapai County. Hopefully the rest of the state, there are some. You're not going to sell a ton of volume though. Somebody's not going to come up and say, I'll take a whole crate of lettuce. Not likely. Once you get into the subscription service, now it's like, okay, we're packing, we might pack 50 boxes. That's a lot more volume. Restaurants, they want consistency. And if they've committed to you and they maybe even have a dish on their menu that includes your watercress and, maybe some peppers, some special peppers that you grow, or mushrooms or something, you have to be there. If not, the Cisco rep will be there and you're going to lose it. Wholesale is certainly the lowest margin, yet highest volume. It took me a long time in the wine industry because same thing. We started direct to consumer, and I had this feeling. It's like I got to get to the wholesale tier because that means I've made it or something. I ended up spending so much of my time chasing so many low margin sales that in hindsight now, it's like I should have just focused on those customers who are right in front of me, telling my story and establishing my brand, and let those wholesale accounts come later. We're not a big producer. We never, maybe we won't ever be a big producer. That's not really in our goal. But remember, what we're trying to get to is commercial viability. And it might be that the best way to get to commercial viability is to do these two rungs really well. Do something really good, master that before you feel like, oh gosh, I've got to get to a restaurant. Maybe you do, but also maybe you're leaving things behind in tier 1 and tier 2 by trying to get to tier 3. Okay, so that was the first part. Now let's look at actually what we're planting so we can plant wisely. Anybody who's sold at a farmer's market knows at the end of the day when you've got 10 bags of lettuce and it's like, man, where the heck is this going to, I overpicked this week, or the other way around, you sell out, an hour in and everybody's walking by and saying, do you have any of that lettuce mix? So we've got to get to where we're planning our intervals. So at each week we have the amount we need. I can't help you with that. Maybe I can't tell you over this Zoom what's best for you. You'll have to kind of reflect on what has worked, what your customers need. I do a couple different succession planning workshops, and I did some this last year that were specific to the Verde Valley, and then one to West County here in Yavapai. What we grow here in Camp Verde area is going to be different than even what they grow in Prescott. The days to maturity guides are helpful. They're not a guarantee. They are more accurate kind of in the shoulder seasons. So as we get into the summer and as we get into the winter, you usually have to add 10 to 20% of time on there. It gets colder, so it takes longer. It gets hotter, so the plants get more stressed, so it takes longer. What else do I want to say about days to maturity? Well, and this is maybe just another point where you guys can reflect on how do I develop the best succession for my business so I have what I need when I need it. Now, two approaches, and this was part of the succession planning, how we actually want to plant. I'm starting to go into a little bit more technical stuff and not so much, broad scaling up. As we think about how we want to plant, you can either do it with block planting. So that's where you've got one, maybe it's a 30-inch row and it's 100-foot long, and you can calculate how many square feet you have there based on what crop you're going to grow. It's this big, we can get X number of crop in this block, and we're going to plant all of that block. It's exactly that. It really helps. It's a little bit easier to grow that because then you can water that one block as one thing. It needs one set of nutrients. It needs one set of water. When it's ready to go, you harvest it all. The challenge here is in the succession because then almost got to start over. You got to prep the soil and you got to plant again. Maybe this is the best way to go for you. It does simplify things. Another way to look at it is to do some relay planting, which might or might not work. It's kind of the next level of precision. You definitely need to just consider what you're growing. So with relay planting, you might grow a second crop before the first one is finished, or it could be the other way around. Let's say you wanted to grow some brassicas that get really big. Brussels sprouts, we might need 24 inches in that Brussels sprout. Well, it's also going to take us 80, 90 days to get that Brussels sprout growing. Well, in the meantime, you could have radishes growing around there that are going to take 45 days. You can harvest the radish. And then after the radish comes out, then your Brussels sprouts are going to get bigger. So you can also make a mess doing that, but think about the space you have as you're thinking about your succession planning. If you've got plenty of space, it might just be easier to do your block planting because then you can manage each block and the water demands and everything independently. If we go back to our constraint triangle and your constraint is land and you just don't have much space, so you need to make absolutely as much production out of your space as possible, consider doing relay planting in a more dense planting. So now what the heck are we going to plant? Some sort of a blend, and you guys again will have to reflect on what makes most sense for you. Usually a blend of those quick cash crops that you always want, salad greens you might always want, and then the staples. For those that sell at a farmer's market, what are some of your higher price point products? What do people like to buy? You all raised your hands. I know you you grow at you sell at farmers markets. I have an idea, but I want to hear from you. What does well, and what are people willing to spend their money on? What are they not willing to spend their money on? We could go that way.
And Michael, we are getting some feedback in the chat here. Kendra says exotic fruit. Hillary says salad mix and tomatoes. Dorel says tomatoes as well. We're seeing people love carrots, herbs are hit and miss, but tomatoes any day.
Yes, very good. Yeah, sorry, I don't see the chat here. Thank you, Brady. Tomatoes, yes, I hear that all the time when I talk to farmers. Tomatoes can be the cash cow. People like tomatoes. It just they feel like when they go to the farmers market, that's one of the things they need to make sure that you can make so many different things with them. Um, Arizona can grow good tomatoes. Uh, some people, especially once it gets hot, they have challenge with big tomatoes like beefsteaks. So that's why it's under the staples. We know we're going to make some money. However, 60 to 85 days. So in the interim, we're going to want to have some of these others. So what we're going to have more relay plantings of would be those quick cash crops. And we're going to prioritize the staples within that. Know your bed capacity. I think somebody in the sign up said they wanted to look at software. Maybe I'm going to talk about that here in a second. You all know what your bed capacity is. You've grown there a couple times. From the market demand thing, really, remember we're thinking from market backwards. So we know what we need to sell. They want tomatoes and they want some carrots. And now we're going to go back and look at our days to maturity, see what our square footage is, and we can start planning what our space allocation is. My dad likes to use the analogy in the vineyard that he's a landlord and all of the vines are tenants. And if that tenant is not paying rent, well, tenant gets evicted, right? It's that variety doesn't do well. It's like you got to go. I'm sorry. Best of luck to you. We're going to plant something that does do well. And a vegetable farm is the exact same thing. If for whatever reason that variety of radishes didn't do well, plant something else in there. Make sure that your square footage is paying you back rent to you as the landlord. So start with your harvest goal, then do a calculation. I've got an example here. If our goal was sell 15 bunches of radishes per week, based on how many inches we need per radish and how many radish bunches, and there's guides that can help you with the spacing. That means you need 20 linear bed feet per week. So that also means you need to plant 20 linear bed feet per week. What you would do is you would figure out your days to maturity. And let's say this variety is 40 days to maturity. You would go from when you want that available, what week you want that available, 40 days back, and that's your planting date for that space. So it's going to occupy that space for X number of days, depending on what you're planting. The best way I have found, since I imagine most of you are growing a pretty good variety of different things, let's categorize them, put them in buckets based on how often we want to plant. So those things that go pretty quick and you want a lot of, the cherry tomatoes, you want to make sure you have many pints of per week. That would be in the frequent category. And then there are some things, if you choose to grow these, you would plant them once. Garlic would be an example of that. Garlic's going to take up that space until next July, August. So that would go into your one-time block planting. This is going to help us with our spacing and what goes where. There's all sorts of great guides. Cooperative extension is not particular to any one company. I just happen to use Johnny's Seeds. They've got, here's their cucumber comparison charts. They've got lettuce charts. wherever you're getting your seeds from, you can probably get some sort of a feedback from them. Cooperative Extension also has a lot of good resources. This one is specific to Yavapai County. It looks at your time to harvest, ideal soil temp, and so on for a number of different crops. Here's what we've got: our market demand. We know how much space we need. You know, our example of 15 bunches of radishes per week. Now we're going to go figure out which radishes work, and we're going to figure out what timing can make sense. So we kind of have to put all these pieces together. There's not a one spot stop where you go, here it is, and it's all magic. So now on to our discussion on software. There is software out there. I've got some examples here: Heirloom, Tend, Ambrook, and there's more. These were just a few I chose to list. I don't use them, so I don't know how they are. They look great. They've got awesome looking websites. They look like they're pretty slick. Tend does have a free service, a free tier, and then it goes from there, and they help you with mapping and they help you with crop succession planning. I will tell you that free tools do excellent. There's all sorts of stuff that you guys probably have access to now, and if you just use them in the right way, Google Calendar. If you have a Gmail account, you can get a Google Calendar. You can add new calendars. One way we did this exercise during our crop succession planning is for each of your beds, you had a calendar. You just made a new Google Calendar, and here's our raised bed north or raised bed south. And you could actually create a crop, and it would be a 40-day crop, and it would be like an event, and you could colorize it by the crop category, and you would know it was taking up that space until this day. You could give yourself a couple different, a handful of days afterwards for bed prep, and then that would let you know you're going to have a space in that bed coming up. And in 40 days, you need to replenish your carrots or whatever it is. That's all free. It's just using the tools that are available for you. So there's both free and paid stuff. Most importantly, the best system is the system you actually use. If the paid systems help you and it gives you a notification and you can be in the field and you can put the information right in, great, use it. I just can't overemphasize that if you don't write it down, it's you're going to have to learn it again. So in farming, we kind of have to learn the hard way. So let's not make it any more difficult for ourselves, I guess. Do any of you guys create value-added crops, value-added products? No, nobody yet. Let me see if I can open this up so I can see you more. Hearing none. Well, maybe you will after we have this discussion. We'll see. How about this? How many of you have walked away from the farmer's market and had produce that didn't sell and you didn't have a home for it? No, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Those we can refer to as seconds, right? For whatever reason, the market demand wasn't there. Maybe it rained and it's like, well, I've got all of these tomatoes left over. Value-added products help us in several different ways. One, it adds value, quite literally. You're going from, how many ever dollars per pound, multiply it by 3 or 4, depending on what you're growing. Another great thing there is it extends the sales. So those tomatoes that you pick and they're ripe and ready, you might only have 7 to 10 days to find a home for them before they're not good anymore. You turn that into salsa or tomato sauce, it's now something you can sell in January. You could sell it this weekend. There's a huge growing demand for fermented foods. So value added is probably, of all of these things I'm talking about, it's probably the easiest way for you to add a component to scale up your business without necessarily having to scale up your acreage and grow just more ground. There's a number of different categories: jams, preserves. There's a orchard in West County, Yavapai here, where they have a lot of different fruit trees, and they can't keep their jams and preserves in stock. It's great. So they really, in each of those and they grow a variety of different trees. But when those trees are ready, the whole entire tree is basically ready to pick, maybe within 1 or 2 weeks. They're not going to be able to sell that direct to consumer, so they've developed a product line where they can sell it throughout the year, and it does really well for them. Fermented foods. There's another grower uh, here in Yavapai County that talks about, I can sell a head of cabbage for maybe $2, $3. I turn that same cabbage into kimchi and it's $8. So, and not only is it $8, people come back and they love it. It's helping with that first tier, which is the direct to consumer thing. People think of them as producing that. So don't limit yourself to just fresh fruits and vegetables. Producing value added. Now, I say that like it's just so simple, and everybody should be making salsa in their kitchen. It's not. Food safety needs to be taken very seriously, and Cooperative Extension has resources to help you with that, help you navigate it. Just a couple years ago, Arizona adopted the cottage food program. You can go through the health services department at the state to look at the process there. There is no fees to register. You do have to abide by their guidelines, and there are limitations to where you can sell. Everything has to be labeled with, it might be tough to read that. There's a little scripty language down there at the bottom. Everything has to be labeled that it was produced at a home kitchen. There could be allergens in there and so on. You put your name on there, your registration number, when it was produced. Not insurmountable stuff, but you do need to take that seriously. The next step up is a commercial kitchen. This is how small farms used to have to do it. You either had to have a commercial kitchen. At our tasting room, we have one, and I'll tell you, it was a lot to put together. We had to have indirect drainage. We had to have 3-compartment sinks, and then the hand wash sink, and then we had to have something with our septic had to be updated. Everybody had to have food handlers cards and so on. And that was just so we could do meat and cheese in our tasting room. There are commercial kitchens that you can rent space from. In Prescott, there's something called the No-Co kitchen, and it's designed exactly for that. You can just come in, and you would want to do this if you wanted to sell across state lines. I tell you, with the cottage food program, if you're producing as they have prescribed, you're probably going to be able to do exactly what you need as a small farmer. Regardless of how you're doing it, you got to list the ingredients. Don't forget that you're producing a food for human consumption, so it has to be good manufacturing practices. pH is a big important thing if you're doing any canning. Don't think you just have a product line, 20 different options. I'd start small and do 1 or 2 this year. And then your insurance liability is going to be different than your liability on your farm. So talk to your insurance agent there. So as I'm probably near wrapping up here, let's look at some case studies, and you can tell me what you think.
Oh, Michael,
We've
I
got,
wanted
yep.
to just update you on activity in the chat surrounding the topic previously, real quick, just in case there's anything you want to respond to there. But we did have Henry say that they're not yet doing value-added products, but they will. Kendra saying that, yes, they were also interested, but had a complication with getting the right license for pickled red onions. Catherine said, working on it. I just got my cottage food license. And another comment from Henry, the university that has kitchens should be helping small farmers with this process. And lastly, we have Jill, who said our nonprofit has a commercial kitchen that can be leased. It's at Eco Center. So just a couple different things in there that I thought you might want to know.
Yeah, thank you. So Jill and Marcus, you guys have a commercial kitchen on site? Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we have so the nonprofit itself is Earth Citizens Organization, and we have a neighboring eco center across the river at our eco center where we have some wellness
Right.
classes. And we have a commercial kitchen there. It popped into my mind, why aren't we using that ourselves? Well, we do have a manpower challenge, so we will look to use that and solve that issue ourselves, but it's available for lease if others need it. We're not utilizing it to the point that it could be utilized.
Yeah,
So
great.
be open to have that conversation, with anyone who's interested in coming and seeing it, and or talking about, leasing it by project, if something comes up where they want to, use those products that you talked about that maybe didn't sell at the farmer's market. Oh, maybe we could go lease some space at Eco Center and just, make these products into a sellable products that, will make more money for us. So
Mhm.
open to those
Yeah, thank you.
conversations.
Yeah. And sometimes until we have these sort of discussions, we don't know those options exist. We're farmers and we got into this because we like growing stuff. And now all of a sudden you need to understand all these other regulations. So thank you for that. Somebody had mentioned help with that other kitchen, the no-co kitchen, and maybe the university could help. So the no-co kitchen in Prescott happens to be owned by the farmers market over there. The Prescott Farmers Market owns it, and they have a manager who can help you with the process of getting into the kitchen. The FCHS department within our cooperative extension is run by a person named Hope Wilson. Hope is available and does exactly that. So Hope can help you navigate. Hope and her staff, she's got a handful of people that work with her. They help you navigate the state requirements for cottage food law, and they can also help you get your food handler, your manager, and your any staff can get their food handlers permit. So there are resources. So thank you. Yes, we can help you with that. You just got to keep the conversation going. So let's look at this case study. Acre and a half farm. There's a couple farms just within Yavapai County that might fit this. 20 varieties of vegetables. They sell a little bit at a CSA and the weekly farmers market. They want to go to year-round production. Well, it might be worth it. It seems like space is their constraint there. A couple high tunnels, so that's going to be some investment cost, infrastructure cost, and they're going to prioritize getting a cool bot system. Now, what we're seeing a picture of is actually a walk-in cooler. That'd be very nice to have, but it eliminates the winter gap and packaging time. Maybe it's a single person operation because it's only an acre and a half. They don't have 6 hours to pack and wash before the farmer's market. I know a lot of you guys are really busy getting product just ready to go. So then you can go to the farmer's market and stand there and, hope people come by. So there's a case study of what you could do. Also reduce product loss with that cooling. How about this? We got an urban micro farm, only half an acre, and they were growing squash. Well, look at squash are huge space users. Maybe there's a time, I see pumpkins there or something. These sell well, but maybe this is not a good fit for the micro farm. If they want to scale up, they probably want to use every inch of their half an acre they have, and they're going to replace their squash vines with maybe something that's growing vertically. They could do cut flowers, which has a much higher return on investment. You can get multiple cuts from the flowers. You could do herbs. I heard somebody mention herbs are kind of hit and miss. Basil is one of those herbs that usually coincides with tomatoes that tends to have a high demand. But then what happens when you pick it? Well, maybe you want to get a small food dehydrator, which is not a big investment, and you want to have a little packaged dried herb section. It's not a huge investment. You could just start small, see if people will buy it. They didn't buy it when it was fresh. I'm going to dry it, and now, I can package it in this way. Again, there's no cost with that cottage food. You just need to make sure you're doing it the right way. So cut flowers are 10 times the revenue per square foot. I also happen to teach the horticulture classes at Yavapai College on the Verde campus here. It's incredible how much people like cut flowers. They're bright colors, they sell well. It's like all of those emotional triggers to make us want to buy something. People like them when you bring them over to their house. They're going to light up more if you walk in the front door with some cut flowers than if you walk into the door with a pumpkin. And because of that, you can get a little bit more money, and it's just like we will put together little mason jars and tie a ribbon around there, and you can sell that for $10 or so. And it did not cost us $10 to put that together at the farm. So thinking about that market driven, remember we're going market backwards. We're going to identify our demand. I'm kind of wrapping it up here and kind of just reiterating some of these things. Think of the market demand, calculate how much volume we need to meet that demand. Think about our infrastructure, and maybe we're going to hit a constraint there with our infrastructure, which will give us an indicator that, okay, we're going to prioritize some investment there to scale that component up. And then make sure you've got good crop succession. And at some point you might hit a constraint there. So you need to address the constraint in order to get up to our number one, which is our market demand. Here's kind of a decision-making matrix I thought that might be helpful. We had those 4 different tiers of the market, which it sounds like most of you are in kind of tier 1 there, farmers market, maybe getting into some subscription type stuff. I'll share this with Braden and Eric. I don't know if you guys can send out the slides or not, if you guys just want it as a resource or not. It's not going to hurt just to send it to you.
There's
You can
already
think about
been questions in the chat requesting them, so I think that's definitely something that people would appreciate.
Great. Yeah, happy to do it. Again, I'm hoping to just create a framework for you guys to reflect on what works for your operations. And you can think about what crop strategy do I want? I've got this space. Now I can plan my succession to hit my target market, whatever that may be. Thinking of 2026, we basically just started the year. What was your biggest constraint in 25? Let's make that a goal to find a way in 26 to navigate that. Does infrastructure fix it? Maybe you've got the infrastructure and it's a matter of let's just plan around our constraint. Maybe we just didn't get the right things in the ground at the right time and they weren't available at the right time. That's a matter of crop planning. Stick to your budget. We know how meager the returns can be. If we can increase what we're selling and get something value added there, it's going to give us a little bit more flexibility. It'll also extend what time we have to sell our food product and so on. Yeah, don't dilute your budget. I think I've got one more slide here for you guys. Here's some resources. The extension's got all sorts of publications. It's extension.arizona.edu. There are local, on the top menu bar, there's a local office. So if you're in some other county other than Yavapai, click on it. Call up the person, get to know them. There's also the educational resources. You can click on that, search for whatever you want. If you've got issues with bugs, nutrients, water, there's probably something in there already that you can just familiarize yourself with. If not, somebody there in the office can navigate that for you or come out and see your farm. Johnny Seeds or even any of the other companies has got some really cool interactive tools. If you go to Johnny Seeds, it's all free. You can put in your growing zone, what sort of crop, and it'll kick you out days to maturity and a number of other things. They are hoping to sell you seeds, but it's a free tool. It's worth just poking around at. There are some free market intelligence tools. USDA has some real-time wholesale pricing. Most of these are based on large markets, so Phoenix and Tucson. But Jill, you had mentioned, how much is Cisco selling, X crop for? You can actually, there's available stuff because these are commodity crops in the market. You can research that a little bit. Hopefully you're on Good Food Friend Finder. Good Food Finder. You might find a friend on there too. That might be a different website. Excuse me, Good Food Finder. You want to be listed on there, but also maybe you're putting together a CSA box. That might be a way to network a little bit and put together and get something you don't have. If you haven't heard of the SBDCs, they're on most to your college campuses. Yavapai College has one. I know Pima College has that one. They're free, confidential consulting. They help you with business plans, also loan applications, grants. I didn't talk about the funding up top. There is federal funds available. There are some state funds available. NRCS equip grant helps with the outlay of equipment. I do know of farmers here in Yavapai County who have taken advantage of that. If you're looking to add something like cover crops, water efficiency, we've talked about sensors and stuff, you might want to look at the CSP, Conservation Stewardship Program with the NRCS. And then there are also value-added producer grants. You see my email down there. I'm in Yavapai County. I can help you with finding somebody else in your county if you're not here. This is my last slide. Open for questions, open for feedback.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us. It sounds like it was valuable. I'm so happy that we added value. And a big thanks to Michael for taking the time and providing such intensive, concentrated, and valuable information. So thank you all for attending. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.